Number 10 brings us speaking with jinn. In one Islamic narration, a jinn called Hama came in the form of an old man that was holding a staff, and he was somebody who actually accepted Islam. And by the way, he was the son of Hem, the son of Lakhis, the son of Iblis. He was converted to Islam by the Prophet Noah, and he lived all the way up until the time of Prophet Muhammad. Very unique experience. Number 9 brings us becoming invisible. When the Prophet planned to migrate to Medina, the tribes in Mecca, they came up with a plan to get rid of him for good. Each tribe, they sent a representative and they surrounded the house of the Prophet on that night. But Muhammad, he just walked out right in front of them and nobody saw him at all. They were completely blinded to him. Another miraculous event of Prophet Muhammad was the horse in the sand incident. The Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, they were on their way to Medina when they were being followed by an assassin named Suraka. And Abu Bakr, he started to get a little bit worried and a bit fearful, but Muhammad looked at him and said this: "Don't be sad, Allah is certainly with us." Then from there, he looked towards the assassin, Suraka, and his horse's feet started to get stuck in the sand. And Suraka initially was able to free his horse's feet from the sand and from getting stuck. But when he tried to continue to follow the Prophet Muhammad, well, his horse's leg got stuck again and smoke started coming out of the sand. And that's when Suraka realized that, yeah, he did not stand a chance. So he had to turn back and go where he came from. The miracle at number 7 has to do with water flowing from Muhammad's hands. There was a time when the Prophet Muhammad was with around 300 of his companions, and they were in a place called Zara. And the time of the day was about the time for the afternoon prayer, but the people, they couldn't find any water to make wudu or wash themselves. And the Prophet Muhammad, he told them to look for just a little bit of water, just a little bit. And when they found that, then he dipped his hand into it, and that's when water started to flow from his hands like a fountain. And all 300 people there made wudu, so they were able to wash themselves, as well as they could use the water for other purposes. Number 6 brings us healing sick people. In one Islamic narration, one of the Prophet's companions was hit with an arrow in the eye. Ouch! Now the arrow was so deep that it went through the back of his head. But Muhammad simply placed his hands over his companion's eye and everything was healed, just like that. The miracle halfway in at number 5 is food increase. So the Prophet Muhammad, he actually fed more than 100 people from very small amounts of food. Whenever he placed his hands on any food, it caused it to increase and everyone could eat till their stomachs were filled, as well as there were foods left over. And in one narration, he fed more than 100 men from a cup of milk. Each person was able to drink milk until they were filled, and actually they didn't have to refill the cup at all. Each of the men, they drank to their satisfaction, and the cup still was filled with milk as if nobody drank from it. So imagine seeing that. Mind-blowing. Now, this is a big event coming in at number 4, the Isra and Miraj. This was very miraculous. Known in English as the Night of Journey and Ascension, this is reported to be one of the most amazing miracles of the Prophet. It's called Al-Isra wal Miraj in Arabic. And this was a night where the Prophet Muhammad, under the guidance of Archangel Jibril, traveled to Kaaba in Mecca to Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and then up into the heavens. And on this journey, it was pretty phenomenal. He met some prophets of old. He met prophets like Musa or Moses, Isa, also known as Jesus, and Ibrahim, also known as Abraham. He led them in prayer, and he reached a very high place where he could even hear the pens that were writing people's good deeds or bad deeds. He also was able to see heaven and hell, and he was elevated into the presence of God. But he, of course, was not able to see God's face at all. The miracle at number 3 is the Prophet Muhammad communicating with objects. There's been reports of several occasions where trees and stones and mountains and even the sand would actually acknowledge the Prophet when he passed by. But there was one incident where one Jewish woman, she was roasting a goat, and it was filled with a very strong poison. So she sent it to the Prophet Muhammad and the people with him to eat it. But before the Prophet ate, the goat spoke to him. The roasted goat, spoke to him and told him that there's poison here, so don't be eaten. So Prophet Muhammad was able to avoid eating the poisonous food, as well as warn the people with him to not eat. Miracle number 2 is splitting the moon. So the polytheists at the time of the Prophet, they kept insisting that they wanted to see a miracle, they wanted to see a sign. And they said that they will believe if the Prophet could actually show them the splitting of the moon in half. So when Allah granted the Prophet Muhammad this ability, he called them all to one place to witness this. And that's what he did. He split the moon in two. But in their arrogance, they still rejected him and his message. Now, the miracle at number 1, some of you probably guessed it, but it's simply the miracle of the Quran. There's a claim in the Quran itself that no one can actually imitate the Quran because it's perfect and its quality is above any other. It's a very superior book, a very superior recitation. It was revealed fully in Arabic, Prophet Muhammad's mother tongue, and it's believed by Muslims to have all the answers of life and all the instructions and directions to live a life on the right path that leads to heaven. Muslims also believe that the Quran is the verbatim word of God, and this is why it's set apart from any other book on the planet and even throughout history. So this is why the Quran comes in at number 1 in this episode. Starting at number 10, we have the first revelation of the Quran. This one is actually pretty cool. So Prophet Muhammad, he spent a lot of his time in prayer and meditation, just getting his mind focused on God and what he has to do in his day-to-day life. And one of these times that he was praying and meditation, he received his first revelation of the Quran from God. Muslims know this as the Night of Power. Muhammad was meditating in a cave on Mount Hira when he saw the angel Jibril, also known as Angel Gabriel, and the angel commanded him to recite the words, and the words are recorded actually in the Quran, and it goes as follows. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. And specifically that's found in the Quran, Surah 96, verses 1 to 5. Now the next surprising story is the splitting of the moon. So way back then, the polytheists at the time of the Prophet, they kept on insisting that they wanted to see a miracle. They were demanding one. And they said that they're going to believe in the Prophet Muhammad's message if he could show them a sign by splitting the moon in half. So when God granted the Prophet Muhammad the ability to do so, he called the polytheists to take a look, and the moon was actually split in two. But, they still rejected his message, even though they said that if they saw a sign like that, they would believe. Now, moving on to the story at number 8, we have the Prophet Muhammad's chest opening. Okay, guys, so Prophet Muhammad, he stayed with the tribe of Bani Sa'd until he was about 4 years old, and that was when his chest was split open. What am I talking about? It's actually been reported in the hadith that when Prophet Muhammad was playing with two boys, Jibril came and took Prophet Muhammad away, split open his chest, and took out his heart. Jibril then took a lump out of Prophet Muhammad's heart and said, "This is your portion of Satan." Next, he washed Prophet Muhammad's heart with Zamzam water in a gold container. After that, Prophet Muhammad's heart was joined together and restored to its place in his chest. Prophet Muhammad's face had changed color. Also, Anas, who narrated this hadith, he added this: "I saw the mark of the thread of Prophet Muhammad's chest." And this is in reference to the part where his heart was taken out and closed back up. And as he got older, that mark still was there on his chest. The story at number 7 involves Prophet Muhammad becoming invisible. When the Prophet Muhammad planned to migrate to Medina, the tribes of Mecca, they came up with this plan to kill him. Now, each tribe, they sent a representative and they surrounded the house where Prophet Muhammad was one night. But Muhammad, he actually just walked out in front of them and nobody saw him. They were completely blinded to him. It was a very miraculous event. Moving on to the story at number 6. So once the Prophet Muhammad was with around 300 of his companions, and the place that they were gathered was a place called Zara. Then the time of the afternoon prayer came, but the people, they didn't find anywhere to wash themselves. So the Prophet told them to take a look and see if they can find a little bit of water. So they found a little bit of water, and then he dipped his hands into it, and out of his hand started flowing fountains of water. All 300 people, they were able to wash themselves so that they were able to perform their prayer. Halfway in at number 5, let's look at the story of the horse and the sand and the assassin. So the Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, they were on their way to Medina when they were being followed by an assassin named Suraka. So Abu Bakr began to get a little bit scared, but the Prophet Muhammad looked at him and said, "Don't be sad, Allah is certainly with us." Then he looked towards the assassin named Suraka, and his horse's feet actually started to get stuck in the sand and he started to sink. And Suraka was able to, free up himself, free the horse as well. And then he tried to continue following the Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr again. But then his horse's legs got stuck another time, and then smoke started coming out of the sand. And when he saw this, Suraka was like, okay, I'm not messing with this guy anymore. There's definitely something up. He's definitely protected by God. So he ended up turning back, and Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr were spared. Moving on to the story at number 4, we have the marriage to Aisha. This is one of the most controversial stories involving Prophet Muhammad. But either way, Lady Aisha, she was a noble daughter of Abu Bakr, who was the father-in-law of Prophet Muhammad. And she was much younger than Prophet Muhammad. And that's the thing that is very controversial for a lot of people. Now, there was one time where the Prophet Muhammad was asked by his companions about the most beloved person to him, and he answered saying Aisha. And then they said, okay, well, what about the most beloved person to you from among men? And he said her father, Abu Bakr. The marriage of Prophet Muhammad to Lady Aisha, it was based on a divine command, as Lady Aisha narrated that angel Gabriel came to the Prophet Muhammad carrying a green silk cloth with her image on it and said, "This is your wife in this world and in the hereafter." And this is found in the Hadith al-Tirmidhi. Number 3 brings us the times where Prophet Muhammad actually saw a jinn. So in some of the Hadith and the Quran, it actually mentions that Prophet Muhammad saw and spoke with the jinn. Abu Huraira narrates in the Hadith that the Prophet Muhammad said, "I saw a demon of the jinn at the night of Miraj," which is Ascension, and he was following me with a torch of fire in his hand. I saw him at my every glance. And then Gabriel said, "I can teach you a prayer if you like. When you read it, his torch will fade away and he will fall down onto his mouth." The Prophet said, okay. Gabriel said, "Read this. I take refuge in Allah from wickedness descending from the sky and ascending to the sky. The wickedness created on the earth and the wickedness coming out of the earth, from disorders of the day and night, from troubles that are risen during the day and night for the sake of Allah and his perfect words. O merciful, accept the things that bring goodness." Also, the Quran mentions that a group of jinn came to the Prophet. They listened to the Quran being recited, they believed him, and they went back to their jinn community and advised them to also accept this message. And by the way, the reference to this is found in Surah 72 verses 1. Number 2 leads us to the Battle of Badr. This is a major event in Muslim history. The Battle of Badr happened around 624 CE, and it was a major military victory led by the Prophet Muhammad that marked a turning point for the early Muslim community, or Ummah, from a defensive standpoint towards one of stability and expansion and offense. It boosted the morale of the Ummah like crazy. It has great significance due to the fact that it is also mentioned in the Holy Quran. As a matter of fact, it's the only battle mentioned in the Quran. The victory of Badr was so important for growing the Muslim community that it was believed to be miraculous. This victory confirmed the divine nature of the new religion of Islam to the Ummah, and the Quran says the victory was because of divine intervention. It goes as follows: "Indeed, Allah made you victorious at Badr when you were vastly outnumbered. So be mindful of Allah, perhaps you will be grateful." And that's taken from Surah 3 verses 123. And the final story we end off on is a story of Isra and Mi'raj. The Isra and Mi'raj refer to two parts of a miraculous journey that the Prophet Muhammad took in one night from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then the ascension up into the heavens. The journey is believed to have taken place over a year before the Prophet Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. And on this journey, he met prophets of old like Moses and Jesus and Abraham and many others. He also was able to lead them in prayer, and he ascended to a point that was so close to the presence of God that he could actually hear the pens writing people's deeds. And this is something that happens in the presence of God. He saw heaven and hell, and he was elevated into the presence of God, but he, of course, did not see God's face at all. Starting at number 10, we have Nusayba bint Ka'ab. Now, this woman is a real hero, and she's a tremendous fighter. She was also known as Amara, and she was part of the Battle of Uhud, where she participated by giving water to people who are thirsty and injured. And Prophet Muhammad, in that battle, he actually lost his teeth, and most of the companions either got martyred or they fled the war. Now, when Amara, she saw his face bleeding, she dropped her containers of water, and she literally took up a sword of one of the escaping fighters, as well as a bow and arrow from another fighter, and she did this to defend the Prophet. She also participated in the Battle of Yamama, where she lost her hand during the battle. So she was front line. The next female companion we're going to be looking at is Asma bint Umayyas. Now, she was one of the earliest converts to Islam, and she was married to Ja'far bin Abu Talib. Now, when he was martyred in the Battle of Mu'tah, she married Abu Bakr. After he passed away, she remarried again to Abdur Rahman bin Auf. And then when he passed away, she ended up marrying Ali bin Abu Talib. So a lot of tragedy and a lot of remarrying in her life. Now, when the Prophet Muhammad was going to perform the Hajj pilgrimage, Asma was in her final trimester of pregnancy, but she was so eager to perform Hajj as well that she wasn't even worried that she was so heavily pregnant. She was determined to do it. At number 8, we have Hakim bin Harith. Now, she was a woman who was the wife of Ikramah, son of Abu Jahl, and she accepted Islam on the day of the conquest of Mecca. She also led her resistant husband to convert to Islam as well, and this took many attempts. And since he actually had run away when the Muslims gained victory, and she went to find him literally in the middle of nowhere. Then her husband was unfortunately martyred, and then she remarried. Eventually, her second husband got martyred as well, and during that battle, she tightened her clothes and pulled out some poles of the tent, and she went out and slayed 7 armed enemy men. So yeah, literally 1 woman versus 7 men, and they didn't stand a chance against her. Number 7 brings us to Sulaym bint Malhan. She was the mother of a famous companion, Anas bin Malik, and she converted to Islam before her whole family did, and her husband ended up divorcing her because she converted. Now, when Anas bin Malik turned 10 years old, Sulaym took him to the Prophet Muhammad and offered him to his services. So Prophet Muhammad took him in, and he stayed with him for about 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why there's so many hadith narrated by Anas. Number 6 brings us Kansa. Her full name was Tamadur bint Amr, and she's usually referred to as Kansa though. But she was a very eloquent woman, and she was a poet. She was so great that even famous Arab poets used to call her the best of all the poets among humans and jinns. She used to cry a lot, and she cried so much that her eyes began to form dark circles around them. But her deep emotions would bring everyone else around her to cry with her. And her ability to express her emotions like this, it really carried through into her poetry. After becoming a Muslim, she was known as Khansa when the Prophet Muhammad saw her and said, Ya Khansa. Halfway in at number 5, let's look at Fatima bint Muhammad. Of course, she is the 5th child of the Prophet Muhammad and Khadija. She was born at a time when her father had begun to spend a lot of time in solitude in the mountains around Mecca, just to pray and meditate, things like that. And when she was 5 years old, she heard that her father had become the messenger of God. And his first task was to convey the news of Islam to his family and close relations. They were to worship God and only God. Now, her mother, who was a real pillar of strength and support, she spoke to Fatima at such a young age that her father was going to be doing this. And from that time, that's when she became a lot more attached and really felt a deep love for her father, Muhammad. Fatima also accompanied the Prophet when he made Umrah in the 6th year after the Hijrah, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And then in the following year, she and her sister Kulthum, they were among the mighty group of Muslims, as well as Muhammad was there during the liberation of Mecca. Number 4 brings us Salama. Now, Salama was the wife of Prophet Muhammad also, and she was known for her beauty, her wisdom, as well as her knowledge. And get this, she also narrated 378 hadith. She used to take good care of her facial beauty, yet she was someone who was also very modest in her dressing, and she wanted other women to be modest too. It was narrated from Salama that she mentioned women's hems to the Prophet Muhammad, and he said, "Let it down a handspan." Salama said, "But that will uncover her feet." He said, "Let it down a forearm's length, but no more than that." Next up at number 3, we have Juwayriya bint Harith. Now, this woman, she was a Jewish royal. In one hadith, Aisha describes her saying this, and I quote, "She was a pleasant woman. No one saw her except he became captivated by her." But it was the beauty of her religion as she lived it out that really made her attractive. Because Aisha also said this about her: "I knew of no other woman who brought greater blessing to her people than Juwayriya." Also, her entire tribe became Muslim after she accepted Islam. Number 2 brings us Hind bin Utbah. This woman, like whatever she did it with all her heart, whether it was good or bad. And she had a lot of anger towards Muslims. She was so intense that she accompanied the army to the Battle of Uhud and wanted to disfigure Muslim bodies. Eventually, though, she converted to Islam, and because of her attitude that she previously had towards Muslims, she had a lot of remorse, and she kept doubting as to whether or not she could actually face Muhammad. And she ended up veiling her face completely so that when Prophet Muhammad saw her, he wouldn't really recognize who she was. And that's how she took her Shahada and officially became Muslim. Now, we end this episode off at number 1. We have Barira. She was an Arab slave girl, and she was forced to marry another slave who was named Mughith. And he was somebody that she did not like at all. But as a slave back then, she didn't have much choice, so she had to get married to him, and she ended up having children with him. Now, Aisha, she said this: "Barira came to me and said, 'I have agreed with my masters to pay them.' And Aisha helped her get free by paying her masters a certain price, and then she was completely set free. And then when Barira was a free woman, she was given the choice to keep her marriage with her slave husband or to leave him, and she ended up choosing to leave him. Then after she left her husband, she went on to become a great scholar, and she taught Islam till the day she passed away."